For 2 months, Wall Street protesters have been calling on the federal government to address this country's widening income gap. Now the rest of the country has apparently joined in, or is it the other way around? In our fourth story tonight, with income inequality the greatest it's been since the Great Depression, Americans polled now overwhelmingly say they're concerned about it, and they want the federal government to intervene. A Washington Post ABC poll out today finds that 61% of Americans say income disparity is greater than it's been in the past, and 60% say federal government should pursue policies to reduce the wealth gap. That, of course, is the essence of the Occupy movement, with protesters across the country making "We Are the 99%" the call to arms, figuratively speaking. Their message now making it into the mainstream, too. Time magazine's cover article this month, "Can You Still Move Up in America?" looks at how income inequality has made the American dream more difficult to achieve. Occupy protesters taking that message on the road today, beginning a 2-week march from New York to Washington, where they will demand that the super committee, the one addressing tax cuts, serve the 99% by letting tax cuts for the wealthiest expire. Already indications their message may be resonating on Capitol Hill. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, the Democrat of Rhode Island, visited Occupy Providence earlier this week. He's now introducing a bill to increase regulation on credit card companies. Meanwhile, in Denver, after suggestions that the movement needed a leader, the Denver protesters, Occupy Denver, have elected Shelby the dog, a statement of some sort. Protesters in Oakland, however, might soon have more trouble getting their statement heard. Police there have canceled all training for the week, leading organizers to speculate that the police are planning to clear out Occupy's camp yet again. Mayor Jean Quan, flip-flopping on this issue like an albacore on a bay dock, now decries the financial toll, saying in a statement, quote, "This situation is costing us real jobs. We can't afford to lose a single job." As for Occupy Oakland's finances, its members voting to deposit $20,000 in donations in one of the nation's biggest banks, Wells Fargo, which protesters there previously referred to as Bankster. The bank happy to take advantage of the free publicity today from the ironic source, a representative saying Wells Fargo welcomes the 100% of Americans to allow us to help them meet their financial needs. Organizers saying the money might only stay there temporarily. It's a new organization. Joining me now, Van Jones, co-founder and president of Rebuild the Dream. Thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Honored to be back on the show.
The poll numbers, the 60 and 61% numbers, did Occupy Wall Street inspire people to feel this way, or have people long felt this way and Occupy merely sort of inspired them to admit to it or say that they feel this way?
Well, I think you have a sort of a co-arising phenomenon, to use a fancy term. I think people feel validated and vindicated in their view. I think people have been feeling awful about the economy for a long time. They were hoping that somehow help was on the way. Maybe Obama would do something, D.C. might do something, maybe they win the lottery. I think this summer, American people, the pain threshold got hit. And people realized that D.C. is just going to be off the rails, and they started to want to see some kind of action. Occupy took off. And I think people now feel very, very validated in what their gut sense was telling them. They see reflected now back in the media in these protests. And so you're going to see, I think, even more people expressing this concern about the economy being broken for most people.
If 60% of Americans in that ABC Washington Post poll want the government to intervene against the wealth disparity, how, and I know it will be, but how can anybody expect, conservatives expect, that when they dismiss that as class warfare or socialism, that it's really going to resonate with anything other than a small and decreasingly large minority of the country?
Well, I just hope they keep saying it. Please just keep saying you want America's government to be AWOL in the biggest crisis to hit us since the Great Depression, that you want billionaires and bankers and big oil to have all the money and everybody else to have all the pain. Just say it louder and louder, please, because it's helping to clarify, I think, that you've got two parties that are both, unfortunately, corrupted by too much corporate cash. But one of these parties is just completely off the rails, and they literally would rather to have tax. The only tax increases they want to have are on poor people now. They've broken their Grover Norquist pledge. They say taxes are okay as long as they're put on poor people. This party is nuts. I think it's clear that they're nuts, and I hope they just keep saying it.
Yeah, Mayor of New York, Mayor Bloomberg, said that again today. He said everybody should have the rise in taxes should be straight across the board because everybody pays taxes, so the percentage ought to go up on everybody equally, which indicates it's been a long time since he's actually been on the subway that he claims to ride. Give me your thoughts from a strategic sense and from an optic sense and any other sense you want to take of the Occupy the Highway movement, the march from New York to Washington. This isn't a million people. It might be 150 when it gets to D.C. on the 23rd. But is there special meaning to this thing? Is it worth it?
This is important. I think that one of the things that people were saying early on, Occupy, they don't have any demands. What are they doing? Well, first of all, it was important that it's not for lack of demands that the progressives haven't made any headway. We got more demands that we know what to do with. Nobody cared. They were able to get people to care and to make the problem big enough that people have to look for solutions. That was the first step. Two things have happened now I think that anybody watching this has to see as a very good sign. First of all, Occupy Wall Street came out and they called the White House out, and they said that the White House should not be considering doing the sweetheart deal with Wall Street, letting Wall Street write a check and get away with never being investigated for 2008. That came out of nowhere, but it was shocking because suddenly this group is very amorphous, talking about every problem under the sun, focused on a topical issue. Now you see another beat in that new story. They're marching, again, on a topical issue, the super committee, which is going to have a wrecking ball run through the American people, more austerity, more pain. It's been in the corners. Suddenly Occupy shines a spotlight. You're starting to see now this movement mature. And they're starting to look at actual issues, actual topics, that if they raise a flag around, suddenly the media starts to engage. This is a big maturation step, I think, for this movement.
Van, lastly, and any way to read Oakland? Mayor Kwan has now taken about 15 different positions on Occupy. What's happening to her and that city?
She's a friend of mine. She's somebody I've known and respected for years. I don't understand what's happening here. First of all, she left town and kind of bailed on the police, or bailed on the protesters the first night. She's in Washington, D.C., has the police try to clear the park, so she's not there to make sure it goes well, so she bails on the protesters. Then she comes back into town, she bails on the police and says they did everything wrong, and then she's, at a certain point, a mayor just falls between the cracks. You're either with the people or you're with the police, or there's got to be some consistent principle here. I think it's unfortunate, but I do think that across the country what you're seeing, this is not a right-wing period. It's not a left-wing period. It's just a turbulent, volatile period. The pain is getting bigger and bigger. People are looking for answers. And I think the more people look at those Tea Party answers, the more disappointed and disbelieving they get, and the more they look at the progressive solutions where you have tax fairness and jobs for people, I think they're going to be moving more our way. But it will not be a linear process. Right. But leaders have to lead, and this mayor is not leading.
The co-founder and president of Rebuild the Dream, Van Jones from San Francisco, for us tonight. Again, great thanks for your time, sir.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Herman Cain is scheduled to be on Letterman a week from tomorrow. So I'm thinking I need to clear my schedule so I can be on standby after he cancels. How many wheels did he have on that campaign? It seems like the number that have come off is 27. Details next.